طيب. So the next thing here is marfu' and maqtu'. So now the author wants to talk about other classifications of hadith. But these classifications are from a different perspective, not from the perspective of authenticity or lack thereof, but from the perspective of from whom is the report, or to whom is the report attributed. So he says, وَمَا أُضِيفَ لِلنَّبِي الْمَرْفُوعُ وَمَا لِتَابِعٍ هُوَ الْمَقْطُوعُ. Whatever was attributed to the Prophet is marfu', and whatever is for a successor, a tabi'i, then it is maqtu'. Okay, so first thing for myself when studying this for the first time, left me a little bit puzzled, because I would expect that he's going to mention what's attributed to a companion before he mentions what's attributed to a successor of a companion, after mentioning what's attributed to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So you notice here, he said whatever is attributed to the Prophet is marfu', and whatever is for a successor is maqtu'. So maybe he did that for the strength of the rhyme, between these words here, marfu' and maqtu'. Because what's attributed to a companion is called mawquf. Mawquf. So it doesn't rhyme like that. He could have done something, though. He could have somehow said al-mawqufu, but marfu'u, mawqufu, marfu'u, maqtu'u rhymes better. So that's what he did there. Also, notice the word nabi here does not have a shadda on the ya. It should originally say nabi, but the poet was able to remove one of those yas. Shadda means two yas. Written only one ya, but pronounced by the tongue two together. He was able to remove one of them and render it as one ya with a sukoon for the sake of his poetry. So I'm going to call that poetic license. He had license as a poet to do so. So whatever is attributed to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is called marfu'. That means raised, elevated. So it would be said, Ibn Abbas said in the marfu' hadith, for example, or some version of this, like yani, maintaining the root letters, ra, fa, ayn, rufi'a, yarfa. That should resonate if you're following the sarf lessons. And whatever is for a successor is called maqtu'. Maqtu' means, in Arabic language, severed, cut off, severed. So are we talking about authenticity here? We are not. We're talking about to whom is the report attributed. And accurately, though, the maqtu' report is from a successor and onward. From a successor and beyond. So you have something attributed to the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. It's called marfu', raised, elevated. Something attributed to a companion. It's called mawquf, stopped, arrested, halted. And you have something attributed to a successor or after that, not only a successor. That's called maqtu'. So there's three levels. And the mawquf for a companion shall come in the poetry, inshallah. Now I'm not saying a lot of words. I said attributed to the Prophet. Attributed to the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam means a saying, an action, or something done in his presence and he does not object to it. That's called tacit approval. Yani, something approved without a statement. Or a description of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. All of that is marfu'. Even if a person does not say, the Prophet said, it's not a condition. It's enough for it to even be something that can't come from other than the Prophet for it to be marfu'. Like discussing what happens on Judgment Day, or if someone does such and such good deed or such and such sin, what does he deserve? These things are not known without taking them from the revelation, which would be from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Then it's going to be marfu'. And maqtu', it doesn't have all those same conditions. Like for something to be done in the presence of a successor and he doesn't say anything. That's what is that? What is that? Uh, that's only for the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam. Not even for the Sahaba is this one. You don't say such and such was done in Omar's presence and he didn't say anything. Therefore, and that reminds me then to tell you about an important rule, which is you don't take a judgment from a scholar's action. You take a judgment from a scholar's statement. So if you see a scholar doing something, you don't conclude from his action a rule. Rather, you go to him and say, what is the rule concerning what you did? And then he will tell you the rule, and then that's how you're going to confirm a rule. So then we're not discussing whether there's a connected chain here. We're just talking about the mere attribution. Uh, then the author went to talk about the musnad hadith. So when I was first studying this, still left something for me. Because he didn't yet go to talk about the mawquf hadith or narration. You could call it a hadith. You can call what's mawquf, stopped at a companion, a hadith. And you can call marfu', what's attributed to the Prophet, a hadith. And you don't usually call the maqtu' a hadith, what's attributed to a successor. But there is a name for something attributed to a companion or a successor. So something that's mawquf or maqtu', there's a name for those two together, which is athar. Athar. The athar, we can say tradition. Inshallah, you're taking notes. A lot of words and Arabic words. You're taking good notes, inshallah ta'ala. You're writing the words down, putting definitions next to them there. He says, وَالْمُسْنَدُ الْمُتَّصِلُ الْإِسْنَادِ مِنْ وَالْمُسْنَدُ الْمُتَّصِلُ الْإِسْنَادِ مِنْ راويه حتى المصطفى ولم يبين. The musnad is the one with a connected chain of narration from its narrator back to Al-Mustafa, the selected one. Walam yabin, and it did not cut off. Yani, and without interruption. Without interruption. The musnad is the one with the connected chain from its narrator until the selected one without interruption. So what he's saying is a musnad hadith is a hadith that has two qualities. One is that it's attributed to the Prophet, and two is that it has a connected chain of narration. So if you want to separate the one quality of being attributed to the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam and look at it only from that perspective, you're going to call it what? Marfu', raised up to the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. And if you wanted to look at it from another perspective, the perspective of only a narration with a connected chain, only, and you don't want to look at some other perspective, then what would you call that? That would be called muttasil, al-muttasil, one with connected chain. If you take both of those, from one perspective is marfu', attributed to the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam. From another perspective has continuous chain of narration. Both of these combined into one, then that's called musnad, hadithul musnad. Yes, and that's what he told us here. والمسند المتصل الإسناد من راويه حتى المصطفى ولم يبن. The musnad, so the linked, if you want to call it linked, it is the one with a connected chain from its narrator until al-Mustafa, the selected one, without interruption. So then, if you understood what I told you, you might have a question, which might be, so if there were a narration from a companion with a continuous chain, you're not going to call that musnad? Or a narration from a successor with a continuous chain, you're not going to call that musnad? So the answer is not without qualification. So when you say musnad, hadithun musnad, without qualification, without a qualifier, then it means a marfu' hadith with a continuous chain. But you could say musnad back to Aisha, musnad back to Al-Hasan al-Basri, for example. Al-Hasan al-Basri being one of the successors, Aisha being one of the companions. And in this hadith science, it is good to know there's another usage for the word musnad for the hadith scholars, which is there's a type of hadith book called musnad. Perhaps you've heard of Musnad Ahmad. And other scholars have a musnad, not only Ahmad. What kind of hadith book is that? That's a hadith book in which the author arranges the hadiths according to the companions who narrated them, not according to their subjects and not according to another way. So in a musnad, you're going to find the hadiths narrated by Abu Bakr together, and hadiths narrated by Aisha together, hadiths narrated by Anas ibn Malik together, like that. Hadiths narrated by Abu Hurairah in a huge section together, because he narrated more hadiths than any other companion. Therefore, the topics are going to be mixed up in a musnad. And you're going to know what's in a musnad by studying it, not by flipping the pages. Then, remembering, still waiting for the mawkuf. He went to talk about the muttasil. وَمَا بِسَمْعِ كُلِّ رَاوٍ يَتَّصِلْ إِسْنَادُهُ لِلْمُصْطَفَى فَالْمُتَّصِل. And anything by the hearing of each narrator, its chain is connected to the selected one, then that's muttasil, connected. And whatever, by hearing every narrator, and whatever, by the hearing of every narrator, its chain is connected. وما بسمع كل راو يتصل إسناده يتصل. Put a sukun there because of the poetry. يتصل إسناده. And anything that by the hearing of each narrator, its chain of narration is connected. So not by ijaza, although ijaza is something, but here, according to what the author's saying here, he's not talking about mere ijaza, he's talking about hearing, not permission, but hearing, and something by hearing, the hearing of each narrator, its chain is connected to Al-Mustafa, the selected one, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, fal-muttasil, then that's a connected hadith, muttasil. We're not talking about whether it's authentic or not. We talk about if it's continuous chain or not. So you have to separate all these things. Separate them, and then you have each one in its own piece, and then you start putting them together, and you see the combinations of things. So according to this, then it's going to be muttasil also if it's to the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam. Az-Zurqani, the explainer, he's saying, not like exactly like that, like how I just translated it. He's saying because really you can say muttasil about something that's not for the Prophet exclusively. The way it's worded here makes it appear that muttasil is for the Prophet exclusively. He's saying no, you do not need a qualifier. He's saying you do not need a qualifier to call something attributed to other than the Prophet muttasil. And so there's an implication in here. Something implied here. Okay, but I won't go further than that. And then, before the time ran out, we still didn't get there. I'm reaching, trying to get to the mawquf. We didn't get there yet. As musalsal, then I'm not going to look and see what's next after musalsal too. We're going to see next time, inshallah. So, okay, we know what the marfu' is, and what the maqtu' is, and what the mawquf is. What's attributed to the Prophet, what's attributed to the companion, what's attributed to a successor and beyond. And the author's arrangement of the kinds does not hinder us from knowing that. The fact that he still didn't mention the mawquf doesn't cripple us from understanding what it is. So the end of the story for me was I just had to come to grips and accept the fact that he didn't mention the mawquf sooner. Wallahu a'lam. Allah knows best. Any question?